What happens if the best psychologists and coaches of real life could face Dexter Morgan and his dark passenger? Could they assume their struggles, cross the walls that they have built? Or would they do it? Do they become another part of your carefully controlled world? Today, we will explore the Dexter Morgan, a psychology classifying the most famous therapists and coaches to see who could discover their deepest secrets and who would not have a chance. We have Iyanla Vanzant, the transforming spiritual life coach and star of Iyanla, Fix My Life. Known for her ability to deepen her emotional wounds in clients, Iyanla would approach Dexter not as a problem to solve, but as a human being in desperate need of healing. He would probably begin to smoothly probe the source of his pain. Say something like, "Dexter, the man you are today was born in that shipping container. What finally needs that child to feel complete?" Her strength lies in her ability to create a safe space for raw vulnerability, something that Dexter rarely, if ever, has been allowed to experience. Iyanla's approach would be rooted in empathy, not in the trial. She would not attack Dexter's actions or try to dismantle the Harry Code directly. Instead, it would focus on emotional gaps that the code does not address: loneliness, fear, and yearning buried under Dexter's controlled exterior. Framing its trauma as an unresolved story instead of a permanent state, Iyanla could push Dexter to imagine a free life of the dark passenger. However, the deep dependence on Dexter control would make this process difficult. Your survival depends on suppressing vulnerability, and Iyanla's approach would require trust, emotions that he has spent his life avoiding. However, his unique force is his ability to weave spirituality and healing. Dexter, who often sees himself beyond redemption, finds him discordant but intriguing listening to Iyanla talk about forgiveness, not for others, but by itself. What if you could forgive yourself, to survive the only way you knew how? Such a question could destabilize the rigid structure of his identity, forcing him to consider whether his darkness is as permanent as he believes. Even if Dexter does not completely accept the idea, the seed of self-reflection could start growing. However, Iyanla's emphasis on emotional connection would still meet significant resistance. Dexter's detachment is not just a defense mechanism, it is the basis of his survival. While your moving and compassionate approach could cause questions about your ability to connection, it is unlikely that Dexter gets completely involved with his process. Vulnerability, for Dexter, is a risk that he conditioned himself to never take. In the end, Iyanla's empathic and spiritual approach could make it one of the few people capable of reaching Dexter's humanity, even if it is only briefly. Your ability to frame healing as an act of self-pity instead of weakness could leave Dexter questioning the need for his darkness. While the dark passenger would remain, the influence of Iyanla could open a door. A Dexter never realized that there was, to a life in which it is not defined only by survival and control. We have Tony Robbins, the transformation coach whose life is bigger than life. The presence and relentless optimism have changed millions of lives. Robbins is known for his ability to break mental barriers and rethink perspectives with a mixture of motivation, energy, and processable strategies. In front of Dexter Morgan, Tony would not stop in the past or dig into trauma. Instead, it would focus on the possibility, beginning with a provocative question. What if your darkness is not your identity, but a habit that you have convinced yourself that you need? Who would you be without him? Tony's approach would attract a practical nature and be oriented to Dexter's results. Dexter prospers about structure and control, and Robbins' emphasis on the reprogramming of habits and construction of empowering beliefs would resonate. Robbins could frame Dexter's dark passenger as limit belief instead of an unavoidable truth. Would push Dexter to see his code not as a tool for survival but as a self-imposed prison, restricting him to discover what he could become. For a man like Dexter, who has spent his life dominating control, this change in perspective could be discordant and intriguing. However, Tony's high-energy methods, rooted in impulse and positivity, could collide with the deeply rooted nature of Dexter's darkness. Robbins stands out for an inspiring change in those ready to hug him. But Dexter's compulsions are not just bad habits. They are survival mechanisms built on years of trauma and repression. While Robbins could plant the idea that Dexter has the power to rewrite his story, convincing him that I released his security, darkness would be an uphill battle. Tony could also challenge Dexter's central motivations. What are you trying to protect? Clinging to this darkness? Is it security, force, or fear what happens if you leave it go? These questions could force Dexter to face uncomfortable truths about the emotional emptiness that has been avoided. While Dexter thrives in control, Robbins could challenge. He sees control not as domination, but as the freedom to choose a life beyond them. The most convincing aspect of Robbins' approach would be his ability to attract Dexter's intellect while taking advantage of its hidden potential of change. Robbins would not focus on guilt or pity. He would frame the transformation as an empowering choice. You're not broken, Dexter. You have just been executing the incorrect program. We are going to rewrite it. This message could resonate deeply, offering Dexter a look at how life could be without the constant weight of his darkness. In the end, Tony Robbins' transformation methods could leave Dexter with a new awareness of his agency and the possibility of a life not defined by his dark passenger. While Robbins' emphasis on positivity and action could not completely dismantle the Dexter compulsions, it could open a door to self-reflection that is rarely allowed. Dexter might leave the session intrigued, even inspired, but whether he'd embrace change or return to the comfort of his carefully controlled darkness would remain the ultimate question. Dr. Phil, the hard-love psychologist whose direct, meaningless approach has made it a family name. Known for its ability to cut excuses, and it forces people to face their truths, Dr. Phil would not be contained with Dexter. He could bow forward, his sharp but measured tone, and says, "You are not a hero cleaning society disorder. You are a man who uses a code to justify the feed of your darkness." This blunt confrontation could destabilize the carefully constructed moral framework of Dexter, forcing it to question the narrative of his justice he has built around the Harry Code. Dr. Phil's strength lies in his ability to expose denial, and with Dexter, would concentrate on the motivations behind your actions. I could press Dexter to admit that his murders are not really about justice, but about satisfying an internal need born of trauma. You are not fixing the system, Dexter. You are protecting yourself from the pain you have never treated. For most people, this level of scrutiny would force an advance, but Dexter is not most people. He does not work in denial. He is fully aware of his darkness and has accepted it as a fundamental part of who he is. While Dr. Phil's frankness could expose Dexter's failures, justifications would not challenge its underlying acceptance of the dark passenger. However, Dr. Phil could go further, addressing not only Dexter's actions but his emotional consequences. Could push Dexter to face the isolation and vacuum his double life has created. You have built your whole world around control, but how much has it cost you? Do you even know how to be free of this weight? This interrogation line could leave Dexter with uncomfortable truths to consider, even if Dr. Phil is resisting externally. Try to push it towards responsibility. What makes Dr. Phil's approach particularly convincing is his ability to deliver hard truths while planting the exchange seeds. I could suggest that Dexter's agency in the Harry Code has prevented him from really facing his trauma. Instead of just managing his darkness, Dr. Phil could challenge Dexter to imagine a life where his identity isn't defined by it. You are not the shipping container yacht, Dexter, but you are still living as you are. You could offer Dexter a new perspective, even if you do not immediately dismantle your nucleus beliefs. Despite this, Dr. Phil's methods have their limits. It's simple and promoted by responsibility. The style assumes that people want to change, but Dexter does not see their darkness as a problem. He sees it as his survival. While Dr. Phil could make holes in Dexter's logic and force him to face uncomfortable truths, he would fight to provide a convincing path that Dexter could not simply rule out. Dexter thrives with control, and Dr. Phil. The confrontation approach may seem an attack instead of an invitation to transform. In the end, Dr. Phil McGraw's difficult love tactics would challenge Dexter's rationalizations and force him to examine the emotional emptiness left by his darkness. However, without going to the deepest layers of the Dexter psyche or offering an alternative that finds viable, the dark passenger would remain firmly in place. Dexter could leave the session with some intellectual challenges to reflect, but their darkness and their calculated detachment probably remain intact. We have Oprah Winfrey, the queen of emotional connection, and possibly one of the most influential figures in modern media. Oprah's incomparable capacity to foster vulnerability could be transformative for someone like Dexter, who has spent his life perfecting masks to hide your true self. She would not approach him with judgment or confrontation. Instead, she would attract him with her disarming presence and reflection questions. Who are you, Dexter, without the dark passenger? And what does that part of, do you finally need to feel alone? These questions could cross Dexter's defenses as nothing else. Oprah's force lies in his ability to see humanity in all, even those who have made the unthinkable. With Dexter, she would not focus on her actions but on emotions. It is repressed to survive. She could guide him towards the review of her childhood trauma, not as an excuse for its darkness but as a source of healing. When they frame its history, not as a tragedy but as a narration you have the power to rewrite, Oprah could plant the idea that Dexter's darkness is not a permanent state. Her ability to connect emotionally might push Dexter to reflect on parts of himself he's long buried. The child in the shipping container. That I just wanted to feel safe and loved. What distinguishes Oprah is his ability to make even the most resistant people open. She could ask Dexter to explore not only what she does, but why she does it. When you take a life, Dexter, who are you protecting? Yourself, the people you love, or the little boy who couldn't save his mother? This type of question would not only challenge Dexter intellectually, but would force him to face the emotional motivations that drive his actions. For a man who thrives with logic and control, this emotional survey could leave him uncomfortable and exposed. However, although Oprah's empathic approach could cause a deep self-reflection, it could not be sufficient to completely dismantle the psychological structures that support Dexter's darkness. The lack of clinical training means that he would not have the tools to navigate the complexities of his compulsions or offer strategies to break them. Dexter could feel a spark of hope or a brief sense of connection, but that would translate into a significant change is uncertain. Even so, Oprah's influence could create a domino effect on Dexter's psyche. Your ability to frame healing as a self-pity trip instead of punishment could resonate with him on a deeper level. What happens if you forgive yourself, Dexter? Not for what you have done, but for surviving the only way you knew how. Such perspective could challenge Dexter's belief that he is beyond redemption, which forces him to reconsider the role of the dark passenger in his life. In the end, Oprah Winfrey's unique capacity to connect at a deeply human level could leave a durable imprint in Dexter, even if it does not release it completely from its darkness. I might not dismantle the dark passenger, but could plant seeds that are delayed in his mind, a quiet reminder that he is more than the sum of his trauma and his actions. If Dexter acts on that reminder, it's another story. But Oprah's influence, without a doubt, will leave him questioning everything he thought he knew about himself. These real-life figures are each with unique strengths to the table, from the hard love of Dr. Phil to Oprah's incomparable empathy. But when it comes to dismantling the dark passenger, even the best of them would face an uphill battle. Dexter's darkness is not just a psychological quirk. It is a central part of who they are, formed by trauma and survival. While some could break the surface, the question is still, can anyone change a man who thrives in the darkness? What do you think? Let us know in the comments, and be attentive for more explorations of psychology and the twisted world of Dexter. See you in the next.